This conference will now be recorded.
Uryan is out today, so I am going to stand in momentarily for today only. So he will be back for policy board and for next month as well. So it's 9:34 a.m. We will go ahead and call this meeting to order and move to agenda item number 2 with an opportunity for public comment. If there's anyone from the public in the room or online.
Is your microphone on? Is the red light on?
We switch to this one. Is that better? Hey, is there anyone online that has left any comments? Callie or Tay, is there anyone online with comments? No? Okay. All right. Hearing none, we will move to item number 3 for regarding the approval of the minutes from the April 21st, 2026 meeting. If you've had a moment to review those, or if there's any questions or discussions. Otherwise, we can call for a motion for approval.
Move to approve.
Okay. Motion from Robbie and a second from Andrew. Thank you. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. We will then move on to agenda item number 4 regarding the recommendation to approve the draft regional active transportation plan on pages 10 through 49 in your packet. Anita.
Starting last year in June, we started off with taking it off for public comment to see if the community had an interest in a regional active transportation plan. And we did receive a lot. Would you mind going to the next slide? We did one more, please. If you're interested in looking at the plan, you can do the QR code there, and there's also a digital map, but you can keep going, Kendra. That's a good place to land for a minute. So we were out in the public, and there was a huge response, like, you know, for our region. We had the first round, I think 70-something survey completions. And then when we went back this past, I think February 23rd through April, it was a 45-day public comment period. And they had a chance to look at the plan. And we really emphasized that 3-mile philosophy, live, work, and play within 3 miles of your home. And that's what those blue cylinders are there, circles, excuse me. And it sort of really paints a good picture of what is possible in our region to have an active transportation trail from, say, Kempner all the way to Troy, which totally encompasses our region. It's a visual, it's a
So, if you are interested, please reach Okay, moving ahead to the schedule of activities for the travel demand model. This is also just a brief update. We have this call to update with Warren. That's the master schedule of activities with Warren for the input data, which is the demographics and the network into their meeting packet. We will be touching base with them periodically throughout this collection of data. And then the outreach schedule that we will be utilizing with TxDOT is also a second page in your packet. So once we get the input data from Warren, we'll then turn and partner and focus our efforts with TxDOT to collect the output data. And then that way we'll have a new model that we can run for the next call for projects that we anticipate in the next 9 to 12 months. So that is all for that item as well. Another item regarding the draft federal certification report, and that is in your packet on pages 180 through 198. This is item 12. We had our, as you know, our federal certification review April the 15th through the 16th. Your participation is appreciated. Thank you all for those that participated in our technical meetings and the roundtable and interviews. So we just want to highlight things to you all for those efforts. And the preliminary feedback that we received from Federal Highways and our transit administration partners was that we have done a good job, and that information is not tonight. So all of that hinges on our coordination efforts with you all. So thank you for that and allowing us to do great work because of our partnerships with you all. So again, that initial feedback is included in your packet. Those comments are subject to still change as the report is finalized. The public comment period for our federal certification actually remains open for May 22nd. So once that closes out, May 22nd, Federal Highways and FDA, they will gather any final comments from the public, include those which are on the report, and send that officially to us. Close to the end of May or early June. Callie, are we ready?
We are good now. Well, we are working.
Are we still live?
Yes,
I need to come adjust your microphone.
Yes.
they're able to see through a small webcam, and they are able to hear it from what we're hearing or seeing online. So, apologies, everyone.
Ready to go, Callie and Tay.
All right. For those online, thank you for being patient with us. If we are ready, Callie, we will move to introduce item 6, which is the tribal historic preservation and transportation planning efforts led by the TxDOT Department of Tribal and the Texas Historical Commission. We have Rebekah, Dobrasko, and Brad Jones to do a presentation. And Callie, I will allow you to jump to item 6 if you don't mind.
Yes. Can you make her big?
Here. Make him big or? Oh.
All right, Rebekah, and Callie, I'm going to let you advance the slides. Rebekah, and we will have
Hi, I can barely hear you, but hopefully you said go ahead. Good morning, everyone. I am Dobrasko, and I am the Cultural Resources Section Director at the Texas Department of Transportation. And I'm here this morning just to kind of give you a little bit of a background about what TxDOT does as far as historic preservation and tribal consultation and compliance on our projects, especially as related to those who receive federal highway information, Federal Highway Administration funds. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So as you know, and as you were just talking about, the MPOs and the COGS come in for transportation project development in the state of Texas, kind of at the beginning of the road to project development, right? And planning and building TxDOT roads can be a really long time. And so I just kind of wanted to throw this up as like a visual that starts with the planning process and ends with the actual construction and maintenance of the transportation project. And the process that Brad and I are going to talk about today, this morning, kind of comes in at that second step on the road. So we're coming in after all of the transportation plans have been approved and developed for the regions across the state. So we work very specifically in the environmental review process when projects are selected and moved forward for ultimate design. So I know that the MPO works mostly with TxDOT on this first stop on this road, right? Planning for the transportation needs for the region for the next 4, 10, 25 years. For the rural transportation plans, the public transportation plans, the active transportation plans, all of that fun stuff. And I know that the Federal Highway Administration does require tribal outreach and invitations to participate in those planning processes. But I wanted to be clear here at the very beginning before we kind of go into what we do on a high level, that that's a separate kind of tribal consultation and conversations than what Brad and I do as part of the environmental process. So you, with your planning process, do have different goals than what we do when we go in talking about the project and the laws that we're complying with. So we can certainly help you understand what tribes have an interest in the counties you oversee. We can give you the contact information for those tribes. But we have contacts in the tribal historic preservation or cultural or tribal historic preservation offices. And those may not be the best contacts to talk about transportation plans, but we can certainly help. But I just wanted to be clear. And so the process that we're going to talk about today and kind of what we do comes into play with projects subject to the National Historic Preservation Act, specifically Section 106 of that act, and the Antiquities Code of Texas. You can hit the next slide for me, please. So before I turn the presentation over to Brad, who's really going to kind of talk about those laws in more detail, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about TxDOT's cultural resource staff. There are 17 of us on the team. We have 9 archaeology project planners. We have 6 historical studies project planners who deal with everything non-archaeology, so basically from the ground up. We do have 1 tribal coordinator or liaison, and then me as the section director. We are all based in the Environmental Affairs Division, but we assist all of the 25 districts with their project compliance and any cultural resource related questions. There are no cultural resource staff employed by any of our districts or like embedded in the districts. So we are the subject matter experts working on this for TxDOT, our team. And so really our job is to make sure that all of our projects are in compliance with all appropriate federal and state historic preservation and cultural resource laws. So before we go into a little bit about what exactly that is, I just wanted to make a couple of points about TxDOT. So hopefully most of you know this, but TxDOT has an agreement with Federal Highway Administration to act on its behalf as a federal agency in Texas for FHWA projects in the environmental arena. So we have what is called NEPA assignment, which means that TxDOT serves as the federal government for almost all of the environmental law requirements for projects. So when Brad starts talking about like federal agencies, that's where we kind of stand in for that. Next slide, please. We also comply with Section 106 and the Antiquities Code with 2 agreements that are laid out with federal and state agencies. These agreements are both available on our website if you would like to read them. They detail exactly what, who, and how the agency will ensure that these laws are being followed. And we've had agreements like this in place for decades, and we continue to streamline and monitor the agreements as we continue to work on and develop projects. Next slide. Even though TxDOT has quote unquote NEPA assignment from the Federal Highway Administration, FHWA still retains the official government to government, to federal government to tribal government consultation responsibilities with federally recognized tribes. So TxDOT and the THC, we know of 29 federally recognized tribes that have historic interest in some portion of the state of Texas. TxDOT still does daily project level consultation with those tribes. And in addition to the consultation that we do with them about our projects, we also maintain contact lists for each tribe, maintain accurate areas of interest for each tribe, so we do not contact them about projects where they are not concerned. We hold monthly calls to discuss TxDOT projects, archaeology research, other TxDOT FHWA items, such as long-range transportation plans, tribal transportation grants, or corridor plans. And that's something that you as the MPO are always welcome to join us if you have something you would like to present to them. We also hold an annual consultation meeting in partnership with the THC and the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department to talk about broad projects and issues related to our programs. We also have tribal histories on 11 tribes written in partnership with those tribes. And we also have Section 106 mitigation projects that reflect tribal consultation and input. And so then that's really kind of all I have here. The next slide is my contact information, as well as a website if you would like to go and learn more with all these links to the agreements. And I might drop a link to all of those tribal histories in the chat if that's something y'all are interested in. But please contact me if you have any further questions and I can get you to the right person if I'm not the right person. And now I'd like to turn it over to Brad Jones from the Texas Historical Commission to talk a little bit about what they do and their role in this process. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Rebekah. I'm Bradford Jones. I'm the state archaeologist, the archaeology division director here at the Texas Historical Commission, as well as the deputy state historic preservation officer for archaeology. And I've got a PowerPoint presentation that's got way too much information for this particular talk. So whoever is on the other end pushing the button, I apologize for how quickly you may have to push it at times. Like Rebekah said, TxDOT, I think it's important to remember here, is the federal agency for most of these projects. And in that role, the THC is another consulting party, much like the tribes, with TxDOT as the federal agency. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is more Antiquities Code and how that intersects with Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act and the role that TxDOT plays as the federal agency in that process. And, I'd like to say that we as a state agency have a very strong relationship with our 29 federally recognized tribes. And for y'all, I think we can serve as a resource to help connect you with those tribal members, give you advice. But in the process you're doing, it's really TxDOT as representative of the federal agency that bears much of the responsibility for formal consultation We do not undertake the sort of formal consultation process, but we can definitely act as a guide and provide any sort of assistance you need. And of course, we work very closely with TxDOT. Rebekah mentioned the annual consultation meeting. That's something that for a number of years we have all conducted in a joint manner along with Texas Parks and Wildlife. So if the rest of this presentation doesn't really speak to this topic of tribal consultation, it is because we, like I said, play somewhat of a secondary role, but we recognize the importance of keeping lines of communication open and creating partnerships with the tribal nations that are interested in Texas. So this is actually pulled from a overview of state preservation laws that I give to the tribes to familiarize them with Texas state law and how it intersects with their interests. So if you want to move on to the next slide, that'd be great. All right, so these are just really quickly, there's no quiz. These are just the main laws, Texas state laws that kind of lay out what the THC's role is in the state preservation process. Some of these also, particularly Texas Government Code Chapter 442, also lay out that we are the State Historic Preservation Office and explain that in addition to enforcing state laws for cultural preservation, we also act under the National Historic Preservation Act, which is typically, for these purposes called Section 106. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. We have a lot of resources on our website. I think hopefully this presentation will be available to you guys in some shape or form after this meeting. But, if you have questions about cultural preservation at Texas, I strongly recommend you go to our main website. You want to press the advance real quick. Do it one more. Okay, there we go. Perfect. Oops, go back one. So when you delve down into there, you can see, particularly under the review, we have a lot of really specific information on how the process works, a lot of links to all the different laws, including both Section 106 and Antiquities Code laws. So, I just want to point this out as a great resource you can go to get information, and you'll find a lot of the links that discuss everything I'm talking about here. And a lot of ways to get in touch with, myself or people on our staff who can assist you in these. Next slide. Fun little story here. Since 1969, Texas has had the Antiquities Code of Texas, which basically protects any and all cultural resources 50 years or older on state lands. This is a main difference. I have this in a later slide, but it's worth pointing out here. The difference between federal and state law and how it's implemented in the state is that the National Historic Preservation Act really is triggered by federal funding or federal permitting, irrespective of where it is. If there's a federally funded or permitted project, then the National Historic Preservation Act in Section 106 has to be considered as part of that. The Antiquities Code of Texas is very different. It's focused on state lands. And just for fun, it has a very interesting origin story. Back in the late 60s, Texas didn't have any protection for cultural resources. And a group from Indiana, the Platoro Group, began salvaging some shipwrecks off the coast of South Padre Island, known as the 1554 shipwrecks. And at first it was okay until people realized how important historically and significant the sites were. And it spurred the Texas legislature to kind of rethink its protections for state antiquities. And after a number of, it was one legislative session, but it went on for a number of extra innings. They did manage to pass the state antiquities law. And it's changed a little bit. It's now in the national or environmental protection section or natural resources protection section under state law. But it lays out really a notification process. And, as subdivisions of the state, this is very pertinent to all of you, irrespective of whether you're working with TxDOT. Anytime a project's occurring on state public lands, the Antiquities Code requires you to notify the Historical Commission and basically ask whether or not there is a potential impact to antiquities. And there's some, some caveats to this. Typically, the notification requirement has to be a project that impacts 5 or more acres, 5,000 or more cubic yards of earth, or is in a designated historic district, a known archaeological site. And there are some exclusions to notification just to simplify it. So, you know, projects, we list in the Antiquities Code certain types of projects because of their kind of daily run-of-the-mill nature or their kind of light impacts. We don't require notification. You know, we strongly encourage you to notify us at any time. Most folks don't actually know if there are archaeological sites in their properties. And while you do not necessarily have to notify us on a small project, if a project does impact a state antiquities landmark or any sort of archaeological or historic structure, you are not allowed to do so without coordination with our office. So we strongly recommend that any state subdivision of the state on public land, just reach out to our office and notify us of a project so we can ensure that there aren't any unexpected hiccups later on in a project. Next slide, please. And go ahead and I think hit it twice. This just kind of reiterates, keep going. One more, there you go. Basically just exactly what I'm saying, kind of lays it out a little more clearly from the perspective of the law. Ground disturbing projects on public lands require notification of the Texas Historical Commission. You know, what constitutes a political subdivision, that's who's required to respond to this, is very broadly construed under Texas state law. And, you know, includes sort of what you'd expect, cities, counties, school districts, but also special districts created under the Texas Constitution, which can include things such as municipal utility districts and certain types of economic zones. And we often talk about state antiquities landmarks. There's kind of two sides of this, but for this purposes, essentially any historic site 50 years or older on public property has the potential to be a state antiquities landmark, and that is just a site that we consider significant. So this process is designed to identify those and determine whether or not those are eligible. Next slide. And just kind of understanding the process a little better, the Antiquities Code is the state statute, and the law, you know, lays out these very basic things: who has authority, what's protected, what does it apply, and what must you do. And then the nitty gritty of our law is really in the Texas Administrative Code, where it lays out the process itself, where we elaborate on how do you comply with, you know, how do you apply for a permit, what sorts of reports or what must a report to our office include, and what happens to artifacts that are found. Next slide. Much like TxDOT, we actually divide the state up into areas for review. We have a number of professional archaeologists who review the different areas of the state. I realize it's probably pretty small here, but this is our general review area, and often the review areas are really constrained by the amount of work that gets done in a particular region. You can see West Texas. Not as many people live out there, so one reviewer gets a whole lot of the state. Whereas Bexar County, a lot of people live there, a lot of history, a lot goes on, so you have one reviewer for it, very similar with Harris County. Y'all's region, depending on where the lines work, you're probably split up with a number of different reviewers. But you know, this is how we review the state. All of our staff are professional archaeologists with years of experience. And they review all your projects, determine whether or not you need to do archaeological survey, and then if a survey is required, you know, whether or not that survey and any subsequent excavations meet the requirements under state law. My role is actually, I'm the TxDOT reviewer, so I am TxDOT's primary contact, at least for archaeology, within the Historical Commission. Next slide. In addition to archaeology, we have the Historic Programs Division, which looks to determine whether or not above ground resources, historic buildings are impacted. Justin Cockritz is the primary lead for TxDOT projects. So if you have submitted projects, you may have seen Justin's name at some point along the way. Next, click it one more time. And if an actual historic structure or building that is on the National Register or a state antiquities landmark has the potential to be impacted by one of these projects, it then switches over to our architecture division, who takes the lead. And much like archaeology, architecture is divided into counties, and different reviewers in architecture will be reviewing your project. Next slide. I'm going to skip through these really quick. This is probably more detail than we need for this particular meeting, but most of our review, well, because of our special relationship with TxDOT, TxDOT does a lot of the work for FHA funded projects in the state. So they often act as the primary point of contact for projects, for transportation projects. But for other projects within the state, which may be occurring on state lands or need review from the State Historic Preservation Office, we have a program called eTrack, which is online. And we use consultation forms to basically submit your information to us so that we can review them. So this is just an example of what the old school paper copy looks like, but it's pretty much mimicked online. Next. And, you know, it's just basic stuff. And just so you know, what we really need to know is if it's federal or state, where it's located. So a map is critical, and where the areas that are going to be impacted are occurring. Next slide. And this is just what eTrack looks like. This is a free service, which is available to anybody. You just have to create an account and submit the information to us. Next slide. Yeah, you register up there. Next. And you would just go in, put a new review, and then you submit it. And like the form you saw earlier, it asks all those sorts of questions. So next slide. No. Next slide. I'm used to driving my own power presentation, sorry. So again, this is just what it looks like on the interface. And a lot of it's done with drop-down menus. Don't get too comfortable with it. We're actually upgrading it, so it's a lot easier to follow and a little clearer. But you know, again, it is a free online submission system, and it directs your inquiries to the appropriate person in our agency. Next slide. Just keep going until the next slide shows up. And so you'll get a confirmation. It'll tell you who your reviewer is. In this case, it was Drew Sitters. We made this one for a symposium we did in El Paso. And typically, we have 30 days to review a project. However, with your TxDOT E&B projects, it's actually 20 days. So that's an accelerated review time, which is part of the memorandum of understanding we have with the agency to make sure these projects move quickly. Next slide. Keep going until the next slide shows up. All right. Keep clicking. So basically, you know, we tell you there, let's stop here. You know, we'll review it and we'll tell you if a survey needs to be done, how to get a survey, where to find archaeologists. Now with TxDOT, a lot of times they are actually in charge of smaller projects that may occur. So it's a little bit of a special process. Next slide. As Rebekah mentioned, a lot of what we do with TxDOT is actually dual jurisdiction. So we are acting under both the need for state lands. So most highways are obviously state-owned properties, as well as under the National Historic Preservation Act. So we're doing what are called dual jurisdiction reviews. And what we're doing is our role is to provide a recommendation to that lead federal agency. So TxDOT will send us basically a cover sheet stating, you know, what the project is and what their recommendations are, and then we provide our recommendation. Either, you know, generally TxDOT has really good staff, so I've got probably the easiest job in the review system, but we typically agree with them because they know how to do this process very well. But we do, when a project crosses state lands, always have to issue a separate Antiquities Code permit to a qualified archaeologist to do that work. Next slide. And this is just our MOU. You can go look at it online, both in our rules and also TxDOT has it in theirs. Next slide. And just to sort of draw a few key differences between 106 and the Antiquities Code. Again, the Antiquities Code is about land, state lands. That's when it's triggered. Key difference too, the Antiquities Code actually doesn't have a tribal consultation requirement. So if you're only working on state lands under the Antiquities Code, there is no requirement to notify tribal groups that have an interest in Texas about your project. You know, we obviously keep a lookout for projects which may have a potential to impact significant sites to the tribes. So we will often recommend you reach out, or we will reach out for some guidance when possible, but it's not a requirement. However, the Section 106 process, it is a requirement as interested tribal parties are a consulting party as sovereign nations to the process itself. Another key difference is that the Section 106 process requires both direct and indirect effects, whereas the Antiquity Code is only direct effects. And by that, I just mean that direct effects are where you're actually going to impact the land. So if you're building a highway, it's where you are disturbing the earth. Indirect effects are ways that a project may impact things that are outside of your, you know, very direct area of impact. But say if you're building a highway if you tried to build a highway right next to the Capitol, you would run into trouble because nobody wants a highway blocking the view of the Capitol. So it's an indirect effect. So there are additional considerations under Section 106 that are not considered under the Antiquities Code. And finally, I say this a lot, you know, in the 106 process and with TxDOT acting as FHA, they are really the responsible party to conduct it. Whereas under the Antiquities Code, the THC, as the State Preservation Office, really takes the lead to ensure that that component is complied with by state entities. And you can see there's a little picture down there from one of our recent tribal consultation meetings. And again, that's a really great opportunity for us to talk about potentially significant projects that may impact tribal interests. And it is open, and talk to Rebekah about potentially attending if you're interested in just sort of seeing what goes on, or if there are particular projects or concerns that you may wish to have addressed. As I said, again, we have a very strong relationship with our tribes, and we do have a monthly meeting with them. So we are another avenue where if you have a specific local project that you would like to get consultation and input on in a more informal manner, please feel free to reach out to me or our tribal liaison, Barit Archambault. I think that's it.
Question. Yes. This is either, I think this is going to be for Brad. On your slide, act versus TAC and the difference, can you give an example of what happens to an artifact that y'all found and the disposition of that artifact?
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, under the Antiquities Code of Texas, basically the landowner is the owner of the artifact. So if it's on state lands, it is considered to be the property of the state of Texas. And if something is collected from state lands, we have under the Antiquities Code a requirement that those artifacts be curated in a curation facility that is certified by our agency. There are 17 of those around the state. We strongly recommend that it goes into the most local facility it can. With TxDOT, they actually have an agreement with the Center for Archaeological Studies at Texas State down in San Marcos. So most TxDOT projects actually end up in San Marcos. With Section 106, it's a little different. If it's on private lands, there's typically an agreement made between the federal agency and the private landowner. Some private landowners allow the artifacts to be collected and curated at a curation facility that is agreed upon with the federal agency, or often private landowners are allowed to retain the artifacts collected from their property and they're returned at the end of the project. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir, thank you.
Again, thank you, Brad and Rebekah, for joining us this morning. Callie, if you could realign us back to item number 5, we will hop back one for this action item.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And item number 5 is an action item regarding the recommendation to approve the draft 27 to 30 transportation improvement program and amendments to the FY20 and amendments to the 2050 MTP and the public engagement plan on pages 50 to 136 in your packet. Callie?
Right, yes, so we are amending our, or not amending, we are, starting our new FY 27 through 30 tip, and we brought this item to you, for a few meetings, and, now we're seeking approval for it. There are 18 18 highway projects, and then 28 transit projects. The main change that you will notice if you look in the MTP listing is we've had to change the way that we've listed a few of the highway projects. They're being moved to the group project listing. This is to allow for more efficient programming and easier amending. Nothing is changing about the projects. They will now just be listed under the group project listing. But that would be the main change that you would see since we presented this for the past meetings that we've held. And we've also completed the public engagement process for this tip. So I'll hand that over to Anita.
Thank you so very much, Callie. As with all of our public engagement efforts, we do have specific objectives that we're trying to achieve during this period. And it really is to create meaningful opportunities for early and ongoing participation to our public, which are your constituents, your citizens. And one of the things that in that process is we want to build trust. And so when y'all share our social media posts, that is a great way that we recognize that you're trusting us with the information that we're sharing with the public. This right here that's on the screen, that is our inaugural Story Maps journey. Tay and I, we put that together in just a few hours to talk about transportation planning for the places we call home. And you can look at that story maps. We had 268 views. None of those views went and followed through with engagement on the survey that we had on that page, but it was very heavy-laden content. And at the very beginning, we were shaking things up and asking for likes and shares as a way to monitor what was happening. And while online engagement through our social media is an informal way, it still really reflects what's happening with our plans and how the public responds to them. I can't see that from here, so let me find that slide. Thank you. So we did have 2 public meetings. One was in Copper's Cove, and there were 4 in attendance. And we had one citizen there that was strongly opposed to the project in Cove. We also had a public meeting in Parker Heights, and we had 1 member in attendance, and we had 4 staff, a consultant, City of Plains, and 2 cities of Parker Heights staff members. That particular citizen was just really there. I sort of like she was walking by, so I got her to come in and hear about what was happening. And she was just there for educational purposes. She did not respond to any of our amendments. You want to move on to the next one? So basically, in conclusion, we had 1 citizen that was opposed to the Copper's Cove project, and everyone else, there were no other oppositions. And a lot of shares and strong KPIs for our social media because of the sharing that happened across the board from our region.
And as you recall, 2 of the amendments to the public engagement plan were regarding incorporating outreach for housing stakeholders as well as tribal stakeholders, which hence is what led us to our guest presenter that just presented, and then also outlining our processes such as the federal certification review and of that public engagement effort was background. We know that we had not fully captured those efforts into our engagement plan. So all of these amendments that you see before you will be incorporated into our NCP, our TIP, and our TPP at the end of May if policy board approves. But at this time, we are open, if there's no other questions or discussions on these projects, we are open to a recommendation to approve the draft FY 27 to 30 TIP and amendments to the 2050 NCP and public engagement plan as presented. Is there a motion? Thank you. Second, Ramirez. Any discussion? Yes.
The email that I got from Callie included a copy of the draft plan. It doesn't include some of these projects. How to reconcile those together and do the current. And I see the project listed here, you know, E6 and things like that. I don't see those, the E6 is in the plan. I didn't see SPART in there, for instance.
Yes.
And so I was wondering how, what the document is that policy board will actually look at.
Can you go to that group project list there? So they are in the TIP. They're not individually listed in the front. They've been moved to the group project listing. They are in the document. It's in the back. However, I can find those page numbers and send those to you, but they're listed with their information. It's just in a different listing now. So that way it'll be in the group project listing and it'll be easier for us to amend in the future if needed.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. We will move on to item number 7 regarding the results of TxDOT statewide functional classification assessment, which is pages 145 to 146 in your packet. And we also have Robert Ramirez with TxDOT coming online to briefly go over these results. Thank you all for those that provided feedback to the initial preliminary findings of the assessment. TxDOT took those comments into consideration. And so we will speak to the outcomes of those recommendations. And we will also, you have received an email attachment with the outcomes divided per jurisdiction for a closer review. So this is an ongoing effort. So if there are still final comments and discussions to be had, we welcome you to reach out to Robert and his team. But for now, Robert, I will pass to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. And hopefully y'all can hear me okay? Yes?
Yes. Yes, we
Okay,
can.
awesome. Okay, again, my name is Robert Ramirez. I'm a planner with TxDOT. I'm in the Transportation Planning and Programming Division, specifically in the statewide planning branch of this division. And with me today, I have a number of my colleagues, Nick Warren and Matthew Donahue on the line as well. But just wanted to give y'all, I guess, a little brief update on where we're at, maybe give you a little bit of background for those that may not be familiar with federal functional classification and what it means, why we do it. And so this is an effort that we kind of undergo about every 10 years following the census. The last update that we did was in 2016. And now here we are in 2026, 10 years later, doing, kind of a repeat of what we did following that effort in 2016. And so what is functional classification? Why are FC changes necessary? Just a real quick, kind of to the purpose of it is to reflect new functional classification uses of our roadways, to update the road that each element of the roadway network as it plays in serving the roads of our travel needs, right? It's to ensure our roadways design, speed, capacity, and relationship to existing and future land use development, and to determine eligibility for federal funding to construct and maintain our roadway system, and finally to adjust the roadway system performance, benchmarks, targets for preservation, mobility, and safety. So in a nutshell, that's kind of the purpose of functional classification. We've so far visited 19 districts and MPOs, so we're about 3/4 of the way through this update. And so I guess the update that we held, the preliminary meeting that we had with the district and the both of the MPOs there in Waco was back in November. And then, of course, once we gave them an opportunity to review the data to kind of see what those results were, then we met again this last April here recently to kind of go over what those final findings look like. So, so that's kind of where we stand today. With me today is also Mike Spade and Ashley Maggio, who are the consultants that we partnered with for this effort. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mike and have him kind of run the group through where we're at, give you a little taste of what that process looks like. Mike?
Great. Thanks, Robert. And good morning, everybody. Like a prior presenter, we have versions of this presentation that are very long. We've attempted to provide a concise version here. If you have questions, please let us know. We're used to having more time to describe our process. But if you go to the next slide, just real quick, what we hope to inform you on is just an overview of this statewide assessment that we've been doing for 20 months now, and then get into the KTMPO changes, how we've gone from the preliminary stage to the final stage, and walk you through some responses and themes related to the changes within the MPO boundaries. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see our process. And our process is based on these four pictures you see in the schematic here, but it's driven by Federal Highways 2023 guidance document that lists criteria, policies, and procedures. So we use that as our foundation. And then, applying that, we use TxDOT's statewide data, supplementing with other sources as possible. So we wanted to make this as data-driven as we can. We understand there are some qualitative factors that exist when it comes to functional class. So driving the data as far as possible, and then engaging with stakeholders. There are a lot of people involved with the federal functional class process, TxDOT planning, TxDOT districts, MPOs, and the locals that the MPOs represent. So that has been foundational through our process. And then at the end of the day, we are using this statewide assessment to set a new baseline of what exists today. And it's using procedures and criteria throughout the state. We like to say, the same process from El Paso to Beaumont is being applied all throughout Texas. So that's a high level version of our mission for this project. If you go to the next slide. Gets into functional class itself and what we're seeking to do and what concepts that we're weighing. And there's we could spend a lot of time on this. We're not going to today, but the key access when you consider functional class is that the hierarchy or the balance between access and mobility. And functional class, your arterial routes are higher on mobility. Locals provide the highest level of access, and then collectors are somewhere in between. System continuity is another big foundational element of functional class. The idea that principal arterials should only connect or terminate at other principal arterials or routes that are higher classified. There are many other important factors to consider. You can see them listed there after that second bullet point. It all comes back to the quote there on the right, which makes this very exciting, but also complex, that when determining functional class, no single factor alone should be considered. It's a blend of many of those factors you see. So I had mentioned that 2023 Federal Highway put out a guidance document, and there are some quantitative elements from that guidance document that we have brought into this analysis. And you'll see on the next slide, Federal Highway deems these typical characteristics. So what are the typical characteristics you would expect to see? If you could advance just to the next slide. There it is. Yeah. So this is one quantitative element that we have been applied. So you see on the top there in green, those are the 7 classes of roads that functional class includes. And then it lists guidance for lane width, shoulder width, traffic volume ranges, divided or undivided. These are elements that we've applied statewide and for all the roads within KTMPO. Now you'll notice the AADT, average annual daily traffic volume. Those are highlighted in yellow. So we have Texas. We've taken what was published and made them more relevant to Texas. So we've added a metro range there. Now that does not apply to KTMPO. That's for the metro Texas districts and the large cities that exist in those districts. But even the rural and urban ranges, we did modify slightly to be more in line with what we're seeing across the state. So you'll see in the next slide, there was an additional quantitative element, and these are ranges. So mileage range and vehicle miles traveled range. So Federal Highway published these as a guidance of what you'd expect to see statewide or what you would expect to see in a region of a state. So this is one element where you would say, okay, so the urban portion of this area, you would expect principal arterials to be 4 to 5% of the total lane miles. So we use this as guidance when we start to consider the kind of balance of functional class within an area. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, you'll see just an overview, and Robert had mentioned this before. We've been doing this statewide since September of 2024, coming up with criteria and a process and battle testing that through pilot district process. We did meet with the Brownwood and Waco districts, Waco MPO, KTMPO, in November of last year. Proposed, many changes, many updates. 230 were within the KTMPO limits. That was our preliminary change meeting where we submitted information and requested feedback. We got feedback, great feedback, assessed comments received. Over the winter, we did talk individually to a couple of the locals within KTMPO. And then in April, we held our final change meeting where we reviewed, went through the list, determined which ones we were in agreement with, which ones there were more questions on, and worked that out. The actual project is slated for completion in January 2027. Again, moving through all 25 districts of TxDOT, as you'll see on the next slide. Actually, one more slide. This is our current order of operations. We won't get into this too in depth. We have a 5-step process looking at those ranges, considering prior comments from the 2016 review that Robert had mentioned, getting deep into traffic volumes and identifying outliers and looking at those really low usage routes. Then we assess for system continuity. We apply some rules that we have set as part of this process. And then we assess those typical characteristics, the shoulder width, lane width, and also look at things like connecting to land use, route spacing, and tripling. So we have applied this order of operations to now 19 districts, as you'll see on the next slide. I think it says 18. We were at our 19th yesterday in San Antonio, so 19 to 25. And then the green checks are where we've had a final change meeting. So not as many of those yet. We are working through as we cycle through the entire state. Just in order of magnitude, you can see some of the districts that have given us comments from the preliminary change meeting. We're looking at about an 86% agree rate. And then of those 14, there's comments on, consider this instead, or additional information provided, or other means of looking at it. And we appreciate that feedback and think it's been great. And the fact that 86% are aligned says a lot about the process. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Ashley to get into the specifics for KTMPO.
Thanks, Mike. Hopefully everyone can hear me as well. Can you please go to the next slide? All right, so I'm going to run through some of the responses that we received from you guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to go through the preliminary changes and then walk through kind of some of our provided feedback to the feedback you initially gave us. So looking at the breakdown of the responses that we did receive, so we were at about an 81% agreement rate with the changes within the KTMPO boundary, which is pretty in line with what Mike just presented on the other districts and MPOs that we've been receiving. And then also received 3 additional changes recommended to look at throughout this process. So if you go to the next slide, Kendra mentioned that there were a couple Excel files that I believe were shared with everybody. So I'll kind of walk you through what is included in these, so ease of understanding. On the bottom left of this screenshot here, there's 2 tabs within the Excel spreadsheet. One of them is labeled prelim changes, and then that includes those highlighted yellow and green cells as well. So the yellow columns, that is the feedback we received directly from the district and the MPO. This is where you agreed or you disagreed to the change, and then the feedback provided if there was a disagree. And then the far right column in the green, this was our then provided response back to the feedback received. So these Excel spreadsheets are set up to where you can filter. There's a very easy filter to find the KTMPO changes that fell within the boundary, as well as links to our interactive web map that shows both the preliminary and the final changes within the project. And then also within the spreadsheet, there is then another tab that is labeled final changes. And within the final changes, that's where you will see what we're deeming the final changes through both of the districts, Brownwood and Waco. So that's just a little housekeeping on hopefully understanding the Excel spreadsheet. So if you go to the next slide, I will go through. So this is kind of the responses back. So this is the information that you'll see in that green row. Kind of a breakdown of where we ended up with the KTMPO responses in particular. So there's 186 agreement across the board with the preliminary change. So those moved from preliminary to final as they were presented originally in preliminary. There were another 12 changes that the MPO provided feedback on, and we agreed with that additional feedback, providing information like traffic volumes or some land uses, supporting information for the existing functional class. And so those remained as they are today. So you'll see those there would be no change at that point for final changes. We had another 13, it looks like, that were, we were labeling it district MPO requested functional class. So this is typically where there was maybe a compromise. So if we originally were recommending a downgrade to a local for a major collector, and instead MPO feedback said, hey, what about a minor collector here? And we cross-checked that across our criteria and decided a minor collector would be appropriate. Met in the middle kind of situation there with a compromise. So that was another 13. And then there were 20 changes, those last 4 rows on this table, where we ended up maintaining the preliminary change as shown from the original changes shared. So these, I've got a couple examples that I'll walk you through just so when you're reviewing the information provided, hopefully it makes a little bit of sense. So all that to say, 222 changes within the KTMPO region did move forward to final changes for functional class. On the next slide should be a couple examples. So I'm going to walk you through kind of what that green column feedback may look like when you look at it from preliminary to final changes with the web map and the responses. So this is an example where we kept the existing FC. So feedback provided, good rationale, good reason, and we agreed with the change. So this is an example where on the far left there, you can see there was a change, an upgrade to an FC4, which is a minor arterial. KTMPO recommended this remain as a major collector. We looked at it again and felt like it could still remain a major collector. So you can see on the right there, that route did stay a major collector. So there was no final change in this scenario. The next one, so this is that kind of SC compromise that I mentioned. So on the far left, we are recommending a downgrade to a local. Feedback provided was, let's consider a minor collector. Looked into it further, felt that was appropriate, and so our final change, instead of going all the way down to a local, met in the middle with the SC6. So that'll be sort of those scenarios you see with that compromise rationale. Next one. Okay, so this is similar to that compromise, but there maybe was a change in limits or a modification that was needed to the original preliminary change. So this was a location where the comment provided was the city partially disagrees with this downgrade for a portion of Avenue B between First and Main Street, provides a direct connection to Main, and then south across the railroad crossing on Avenue D. And then going east from Main Street, the city agreed to the downgrade. So this is a scenario, wanted to make everybody aware, bring attention to this change. So we have, the way we've got these changes mapped in the web map is based off of TxDOT's roadway inventory line work as it is today. And so for this scenario, this route on Avenue B is one single line. So we couldn't split it at the moment. We will towards the end of the assessment once all changes are finalized, but we did flag this location. So that little blue flag there is addressing the comment. So this will be rectified where that small section on the west side will maintain that FC5, but the change to the east will keep FC6. So did kind of, that's one of those examples where there was just a change in the limits based off of the feedback received. A couple others real quick. So this was an example where we had our preliminary change, received feedback, but then felt that our proposed preliminary change was still appropriate and provided a little bit of rationale. So this is an example where we were proposing an upgrade from a local to a minor collector in our preliminary changes. Feedback received was minor arterial FM 436, which may have been connection to FM 436 for this specific example, but we left this change here. You can see Waco 484 was the change ID on this one. We left this as a minor collector, an FC6. It's an undivided 2-lane route, lower ADT, and provided access to a neighborhood. So that fit more typical characteristics of a minor collector. And I think there's maybe one more example. Okay, so then here's another similar where we maintained the proposed FC. So this was an example you can see on the right there. That dashed line is our preliminary change upgrade from a local to a minor collector. And the feedback received was local road. We felt like this could still maintain the upgrade to the minor collector. The traffic volume here, the average annual daily traffic was right in line with the other ADT you could see there on those adjacent minor collectors as well. So this is one where we kept the change for minor collector. Okay, and then mentioned there were 3 additional locations provided by KTMPO and wanted to address these and kind of go through them with you guys. So one of the ones was Big Divide Road over there on the far left. It straddles both Brownwood and Waco districts. Currently today it's a major collector and the requested upgrade was to a minor arterial. We ended up maintaining the functional class of a 5 for a major collector as of now and did not upgrade to the minor arterial for this route. The ADT, the traffic volumes there are lower than the minor arterial typical threshold that we see. It's a 2-lane undivided route. It was more in line today with a major collector, but wanted to kind of bring to attention, this is just existing conditions today as things change throughout any development or growth or anything like that. This regularly can get updated through TxDOT TPP's typical process with functional class. So as this route changes, the function of it changes, there's still opportunity to upgrade this in the future. And then similarly, on the next slide, the other two recommendations were Amity Road and Elmer King. These were recommended to a major collector and a minor arterial. We left these changes as we had originally proposed them. There were some system continuity issues with the proposed changes. What that is related to is a higher functional class cannot terminate at a lower functional class. And so similar here, you know, as the area changes, as growth occurs, as the function of these routes differ over time, these still can be considered for upgrade down the road. But wanted to mention we've maintained the original preliminary change for these routes. And I believe that was the last slide. Oh, no, a couple more. So I've mentioned this web map a few times. On here, this is really just an online resource. The Excel spreadsheet has links to this website, but this is where our preliminary and final changes are mapped within both the Brownwood Waco district and the other districts that we've been to so far throughout the assessment. And so you can turn layers on and off to look at preliminary versus final changes, see what is being moved forward through the final changes. And then we also added a layer. It's a little hard to see here on the screen, but there's some little gray dots that are uploaded for both Brownwood and Waco. And those are the locations where the disagree comments from any feedback we received are located. So just a way to kind of quickly find those changes from the Excel spreadsheet as well. And then here's a quick rundown of kind of where we are right now on the project. So we are in the process of completing our preliminary meetings. Did mention we had San Antonio yesterday, so we've got 6 more that we're wrapping up over the next few months. And then from there, moving into completing our final change meetings. So we've had 3 of the 25 districts, and that should wrap up around the end of October. And then our project as a whole closing out early 2027.
All right. Well, thank y'all for that, Mike and Ashley. Y'all covered, as always, really good in detail what this project means and kind of what the expectations are. So with that, is there any questions for the team from the KTMPO side? We'd be more than happy to address. I will reiterate what Ashley said earlier about how the update is specifically for existing conditions. I know when we met with the MPO previously, there were couple questions regarding proposed projects and the need to potentially upgrade those. And we kind of explained what that process looks like from a typical standpoint for functional classification updates, which we intend to continue doing so even today. I mean, we continue to do, project related type changes. Obviously, if a roadway or a project isn't where it needs to be in order to consider federal funding eligibilities, then we will address those prior to the project letting. If the project is already contains the functional classification needed to move forward with it, then we allow the project to move forward with it, and then we address the functional classification after the project has been completed. So there's a number of ways that we can deal with these type of proposed project scenarios. So I would encourage the MPOs to work with your contacts at the district office in Waco, and then we'll eventually get involved at the appropriate time to address any changes that are necessary for that. So anyway, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Kendra, and if there's any questions, we'll be more than happy to address them.
Are there any questions from members?
Yes, I did. So regarding the Big Divide Road, to maintain that at an FC5, what were the determining factors to maintain that?
Yeah, so on Big Divide Road there, that one, so the characteristics of it today being a undivided 2-lane route, and the ADT was less than 3,000 vehicles per day. Typically with our minor arterials, it's going to be, a divided route, more than 2 lanes, typically about a 4-lane route, and then the ADT, trying to remember off the top of my head what the typical is for a minor arterial in an urban area. But I think it's 3,000 is the baseline, is the lower end of the threshold for a minor arterial, and it was sitting at about 2,700 on that route. And again, that's kind of that as things change, as things grow, as there's more development in that area, that could be a great route to upgrade to a minor arterial.
I would ask a follow-up question to y'all on that. Is there a expectation for it to go to minor arterial ahead of any construction? Obviously, the eligibility for it as a major collector wouldn't affect any federal eligibility if that's a concern. So I was just curious as to the reasoning of asking for minor arterial ahead of that. And if not, that's perfectly fine. Any other questions that y'all have?
We want to thank you, Robert, and
Okay,
Mike for joining us.
absolutely. Let us know where if anything comes up between now and really to the end of the year when we wrap this up. Please reach out to us, and we'll be more than willing to jump on a call or explain any or answer any questions y'all may have. Thank y'all.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We will move along to item number 9, which is a discussion item regarding the National Highway Transit Safety Administration early release of the 2025 traffic fatalities estimates. Okay.
Yes, so there was a meeting last Monday that TxDOT hosted, kind of just talking about the preliminary data they released. And here's a big old table kind of showing it. It's used to complement the CRIS data. It's more general, the data that they send out. It's more statewide. CRIS kind of gets down to the who, what, when, where, and the whys of our region. But we were just showing the data that they have presented to us, just comparing the 2 years. In 2025, their estimates, it's showing that it's down, which is sort of reflected in our CRIS data. Of course, we don't have 2025, but 2024 we did, or 2023 we noticed a slight decrease in our CRIS data for fatalities. Their trends have been declining for the last 15 quarters. Ours also shows a trend in declining, but it's still high overall. Of course, we're still working to lower fatalities in our region. Serious injuries also decreasing. We reflect that in our CRIS data, slight decrease as well. Fatality rate for our state, nationally, it's a historic low for this year. In our region, higher in the rural areas, of course, but we're always lower in it. Crash type, it's decreases across the different categories. We have similar decreases, but of course, vulnerable users still remain a concern for us. And it, like I was saying, the geographic insight, it's a national level. Ours is more regional. So just taking that into account when you look at the data. And during that Monday meeting, they did release a GIS map to look at the preliminary, the pre-approved data for ADT. So if anybody's interested in that, just reach out, let me know, and I can get you into contact with the member of TxDOT who can get you access to that map. But that's really it, just kind of updating you guys on what the state of Texas is releasing to us and making sure we keep you guys up to date.
Thank you, Tay. Are there any questions for Tay on this preliminary data? Okay. We will move ahead. During our glitch earlier, we were able to actually go ahead and cover about 4 4 agenda items, just brief discussion items. So I'm picking back up where we left off. Item number 13 regarding public input received for the previous month. Anita?
Thank you. We still have one public comment period open until May 22nd, and that's for the federal certification review. Feel free to share that post on our social media. Do you mind going to the next slide, please? Thank you. Oh, also, TxDOT, they still have a public comment that closes today for the I-35 corridor. So that is on our posted on our social media. I don't have the QR code up here, but you can go to KTMPO Facebook page, and it's on there. Please, please comment and share your thoughts. May is also National Bike Month, and last month, TAC Policy Board and ATAC, ATAC had recommended a resolution, and y'all pushed it through. Thank you for that. So May the 3rd, which was Sunday, Ride Your Bike Day. Today is, I can't read that. What's happening today? Bike and Roll to School. Sorry, I had to pull it out of my brain. And then on Saturday, if y'all will go to the next slide, please. Copper's Cove is holding their adaptive bicycle rodeo. Encourage y'all supporting it, attending it. If you know of any littles that would benefit from that. It's going to be held at Ogletree Gap Preserve on Saturday from 10 to 2, barring good weather. So thank you for good weather. Next slide, please. On Wednesday, May 20th is the Ride of Silence. And if you know anybody who, a loved one or a family member or a community member who has lost their life or have been seriously injured while riding their bike in our region, we'd love to tell their story. There's been a little bitty movement for the 3-foot rule. And so it's highly recommended in the state of Texas. I believe the Laredo Web NPO helped facilitate getting that into the municipality down there. So we'd like to help tell the story of someone that has passed away while riding their bike, and leverage that to inform the public about how they can pass that law in their municipality. But that Ride of Silence is on Wednesday, May 20th, and thank you again to the City of Nolanville for hosting that for so many years. Next slide, please.
Are there any questions starting out regarding public comment? We will move on to our last update. There really is current movement on the reauthorization at this time, but we do encourage you to still utilize the Basics Act in that toolkit that has been previously sent out. There are also a list of transportation-related conferences coming up on the front table for your information. And moving on to our board meetings coming up for the rest of this month as well as next month. Active transportation is next week on the 13th, policy board on the 20th, and then the technical committee, that's titled there on the screen, but the technical committee is June 3rd, with the policy board on June 17th as well. And air quality for the month of April was 55 and 56 parts per billion. If there's no other questions regarding the rest of the update, we will move on to item number 15, which is members' comments. Comments of the members of TAC. Thank you all for being with us this morning. We have quite a bit of information to present to you all as well as data. So it was a very heavy meeting, but we appreciate your attention. And we look to move into some other types of activities as we move into the summer months regarding, again, finalizing our travel demand and refocusing back on supporting criteria. So we'll be bringing a lot of that information back to you since we have now finalized our federal certification as well as these major plan updates. If there's no other comments, we will move to adjourn. Thank you, everyone.